So today I'm going to be focusing on the very current question of, are we heading towards Splinternet, the future of internet governance? We're going to try to analyze the current trends and also what ICANN as a community can do about it. So very short about me, I'm currently studying the Masters in Politics and Technology at the Technical University of Munich. Previously, I was also an early career fellow with the Internet Society, and also I worked at a think tank in Berlin on the project Norms in Cyberspace. So first of all, what is internet fragmentation? So ISOC defines it as the division or splintering of the unified, open, and global internet that we all know into smaller, more isolated networks subject to different rules, regulations, and technical standards. But this doesn't come from a void. There have been some precedents that brought us to where we are currently right now. So even if this topic might think that it came up just a couple of years ago, it was actually first talked about actually over 30 years ago when the cyber balkanization term was coined. That was followed a couple of years after with the coining of the concept of Splinternet. And then we all are aware of what happened. So, for example, in China, there was this big expansion of its Great Firewall. That was also followed by the Snowden revelations in the early 2010s that discovered massive surveillance that was disclosed and that led to many countries actually being more protective with their data sovereignty or digital sovereignty. Also in Russia, a couple of years after, this sovereign internet law came into place that enabled that Russia would have a greater control over their network. And currently we're facing this US-China tech rivalry accelerating through sanctions or, again, data localization laws and many platform restrictions. So before going on the details, I would like to do a short disclaimer. As we know, ICANN does not control what happens on the internet, but we all know why we're here, right? But still, I think it sends a precedent of the trends that we're seeing, and then we can discuss a little bit more what we can actually do. So first of all, we have these internet shutdowns as a very coercive measure of blocking access to the internet. So we know it can be, as I just mentioned, through blocking the access to some websites. Also, there's this measure called throttling, which basically means slowing down the broadband so much that it makes it just impossible that you actually want to serve that web because it's just so slow that there's no way you're going to have the patience to do that, or a complete cutoff. One of the best well-known examples is in Kashmir in India, that it had the longest internet shutdown in history. Here we see this young woman holding the paper with 100 days with no internet, but actually this number raised up to more than 500 days without internet. And it's needless to say what the consequences for both societal but also economical consequences of this is. Also, it's important to mention the role that firewalls are playing. Of course, the most well-known one is the Chinese Great Firewall that affects over 1 billion people worldwide. And also the problem that I see in this is that it's not only staying in China, because, for example, there was this research that JIT Networks, which was an organization or a company that was very relevant in the building of the Great Firewall, is now selling these censorship and surveillance technologies abroad in countries such as Myanmar, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, or Ethiopia. So we see that this trend is expanding and is not staying just in some states, but rather that it is something that could become more and more prevalent. Another way of control is data localization. For example, Russia has been, over the last decade, tightening its internet controls. For example, there's this law already that is 10 years old that makes mandatory for companies to store personal data of Russian citizens on local servers. This could be thought of, oh, this is actually something very interesting. We are seeing also this trend in Europe of digital sovereignty and so on. The thing is that analysts say that, for example, in the case of Russia, this could actually mean more governmental access to critical or sensitive data of citizens that would, again, contribute to the environment of repression of dissidents inside the country. So why ICANN matters in here? I think we have been seeing attempts of trying to break or trying to diminish this multi-stakeholder approach that the internet was built on. For example, in 2010, Russia. There were some China and Russia proposals, ITU, that asked to expand the influence of the countries over the internet identifiers. Today, I was talking in the bus with some colleagues from ISOC, and they were telling that hopefully this is probably not going to happen any point soon. But however, we should not forget that there is some intention there from very big, very powerful states. Why ICANN matters? Exactly, because ICANN has been clear that the internet should be interoperable, and it's has been also advocating that the internet should be based on a multi-stakeholder approach. I just saw yesterday as well that ICANN is going to allocate 1 million euros or dollars for the IGF forum, again, one of the key pillars of the multi-stakeholder approach on internet governance. And it's also very important that ICANN prioritizes technical stability over political interests. So I was reading about that when the war in Ukraine started, the Ukrainian minister asked to ban or to forbid Russian domains, but actually ICANN said no, because we prioritize this technical stability, and it's also important that Russian citizens have access to information, which is already very restricted. So yeah, this is why ICANN matters. And what does it actually mean for us? And what can we actually do in our own communities, say it at the local level or national level, or even as a whole of the ICANN community? One of the probably most important things that we can do is just stay informed and act in our own fields, being aware of what is happening, reading the news and trying to understand how people are being affected by all these type of measures. Because as we are seeing, fragmentation is real, it's happening, and it has direct implications to millions and millions of people worldwide. And we also have to be aware of the fact that every policy decision, every technical decision, every technical standard is a chance to make a positive difference in the current environment. Thank you for your attention. I hope you have some questions or feedbacks. There's also my contact if you also want to discuss some of these topics during some of the coffee breaks. So yeah, thank you so much.
Great job, Maria. Very interesting topic. Any questions in the audience?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation, Maria. My name is Naveed. I'm one of the NextGen mentors. You use the word fragmentation of the internet in your title. My understanding of internet fragmentation is the fragmentation of the DNS, not just the internet shutdown. So what is your opinion on the introduction of a parallel DNS architecture that some part of the world could introduce, and that could actually fragment the internet, but on and off shutdown of the internet, people would see from a different angle, because that is not actually a fragmentation of the internet that we use. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. And this is also a question I had myself while doing the research, because when I was reading about fragmentation and Splinternet, I saw different layers of it. I was seeing some people were focusing more on the technical one, some more on the governmental one. So basically, I could see these different layers of fragmentation can be either on the technical level, government, or even commercial if it's done by a big company. And I think also there's a lot of scholarship debate among academics of what it means and what's the exact definition on that. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. And as I saw, it's also an ongoing debate.
Thank you. Any other questions in the audience for Maria? Oh, yes, go ahead, please. Yeah.
Hello, this is Peter Suijia Wei from TW Munich, Taiwan Network Information Center. And my question will be focusing on the political impact and also on the potential blocking of the internet as well. Because as you can see, those internet blocking cases are basically more from like maybe some governments, they have their own political agendas or they want to fulfill their purpose. But I think if you want to figure out these kind of problems, it's like over the rings that ICANN can actually engage with, because ICANN is focusing on the domain name systems and the technical era. So I wonder how you navigate these kind of challenges and issues to prevent the internet not become the Splinternet. I really like that.
Yeah. Exactly. ICANN, as I was mentioning in the presentation, it cannot do anything about the Great Firewall or any of them. And so what I was mentioning in the presentation, however, what we can do as a community, not only through ICANN, but also through ISOC or through different organizations that are out there, is advocating for this open internet, just like through either through funding or through fellowships like this one, that I think they are an opportunity to join efforts, to be aware of what is going on, and for each of us to work on our local levels on trying to be more connected and to advocate for this global open internet that we hopefully will be able to enjoy for many more years.
Thank you. We have time for one more question. Alfredo, go ahead, please.
I'm Alfredo. I'm also a mentor for the Next Geners. My question for you, Maria, is regarding role that you as an individual can have to avoid this concept of or Splinternet.
That's a very interesting one, and it's something that I'm still navigating. Because, of course, as a young person, still trying to figure out how this ecosystem works, the impact that you can have probably or hopefully it's going to grow over time. But I think it's especially important to work with the people that are facing those challenges in the region. So maybe me as a person coming from Spain, living in Germany, I can try to hopefully get in contact with people over the region, try to better understand and then advocate, for example, in the case of Europe, to try to advocate for this not to happen in any other countries, either in Spain or in Germany or at the EU level, being a model role or giving the example for other regions on explaining also why this is important. For example, I know that Internet Society is when they try to explain why a country shouldn't block the internet, they try to point out the economic damages that it's doing, saying, hey, every single hour that you don't allow internet access, you're losing that much money. I think this is interesting to point out. And yeah, I think also collaborating with other NextGen fellows, that's always a good one because I think we're all doing a great work in each of our fields. And in the future, I think we're going to have also many other points in common to keep collaborating.
Thank you so much, Maria.